Oh, hello, hello, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining our session this afternoon, Scaling Quality with AI eval models. Really excited to have you here today. For those who might not know me, my name is Colleen and I lead customer and community marketing here at Dscout. And this session is our final session in a four-part series with the Design Executive Council on modernizing research with AI, customer centricity at scale. If we want to move along to the housekeeping slides. Perfect. As you may have heard when you joined, today's session is being recorded and we'll send that recording out to everyone who's registered. We really love for this to feel interactive, so please feel free to engage in the chat throughout the session, share your actions and themes you're seeing on your own teams as well as you listen along. And we will also have some time for audience Q&A at the end. So if you want to drop any questions as you're listening into the Q&A feature, that can likely be found for you along the bottom bar of your Zoom screen so that the panelists and Gordon can answer them. And then lastly, before we shift over into some introductions, I want to just quickly share a little bit about both Dscout and the Design Executive Council in case either are new to you today. For those who don't know, Dscout is an AI-powered research platform for capturing in-context insights from high-quality participants. And we're really thrilled to work with brands including Google, Meta, Cigna, Best Buy, Pinterest, and many others. And partnering with us on this series is the Design Executive Council, the premier membership network for senior design and experience executives shaping the world's most influential companies. And you'll hear from a few of them today. So with that, I'll hand it over to Gordon to introduce himself as well as get the panel going.
Hey everyone, Gordon Ching here, calling from San Francisco as I see the amazing audience sharing all the cities that they are calling in from. So privileged to lead this amazing community of design and experience executives where we're really looking to figure out how the future of our profession is evolving. And I'm so excited to have this amazing group of people with me today, and including Michael. So awesome to have you here in our final stop of this conversation. I think all of us in this room have been so passionate about redefining where our work is going, and so excited to hear hands-on how we're going to end this four-part webinar on scaling our customer centricity. So to introduce Michael, I'd love to have you tell the audience who you are and what you do over at Dscout.
Hey, everybody. Great to spend time with you, Gordon, as always. Good to see you. I'm Michael Winnick. I'm the Dscout CEO and founder. I'm here based in Chicago. Have a background in research, went to design school, have been leading Dscout for over a decade. And this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm really happy to get into it with all of these amazing panelists.
And Christina, calling us from, I believe, the Pacific Northwest.
That's me. Hi. Thank you for having me today. I'm Christina Valerie. I'm the Chief Design Officer of the Cigna Group. I'm super excited to cover this topic today. As a person, this is of interest as someone that's trying to find their way in the world. There's so much debate about the influence, the ramifications, the impact that AI will have on our lives and how it shapes our future. So I feel that we need to dig in personally and understand this on a deep level as humans. And then professionally, this topic is so critical to my work. In the health industry, our focus really demands that we take a super cautious and careful stance always. So the opportunity is really to talk about this with a group of peers and experts in this environment, but it also represents the concerns of my team's focus. So that's what I'll cover today. And that's so important to my professional learning agenda. So Gordon, DXC, Michael, Dscout, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Awesome. And Catherine, who works with Christina.
Yes, that's right. I'm Catherine Walker. I head content under Christina Valerie. So my team has traditionally been content strategy focused, and over the past 5 to 8 years, really evolved to be more focused on content systems. And it's so important as we enter the AI era that our content systems and our knowledge layer are really prepared for the types of experiences that we want to support in the future and for the really critical things like Christina's alluding to as we reimagine experiences like healthcare here at Cigna. So thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And Shuman at Datadog.
Hey, hi, my name is Anshuman. I am the Senior Vice President of Design at Datadog. I'm calling from New York, and I'm very passionate about this space. I'm very excited to be part of this group. Passionate because this is definitely a key area of how I am trying to transform my team so that we can reimagine and reinvent our workflows and how we operate and our practice. And secondly, also because Datadog also creates products adjacent to these spaces. So that makes this topic very close to my heart. Excited about the conversation.
And Christian at TD Bank.
Hi, everybody. I'm the VP of Human Centered Design at TD Bank, where I lead the team that creates the future experiences for customers, clients, and colleagues. The topic today is so relevant to me because we're really shifting from the question of like, can we ship what we've designed to should we ship this product or feature or design? And in order to do that, we've got to have the right frameworks and models that really help us answer that second question as early as possible in the product development lifecycle.
And Christian, it sounds like you have a fan in the audience already.
Oh, okay.
So awesome. Well, this group is
hey, Michael.
an awesome assembly of people that we're going to take you through sort of this webinar series. So on the next slide, this is the journey we've been on. I think many of you have been with us on this 4-part journey. This is the final stop where we're continuing to answer what is the role of research teams when everyone can research. And so we're going to go really deep in scaling quality with AI eval models. And some of the kind of frameworks that is really important on the next slide is really the key takeaways that we've learned in some of our recent ones. We have learned that retaining customer centricity when everyone builds means empowering researchers as architects of AI systems in which customer truth flows. Some key points we've heard: researchers emerging as builders and agent designers. They're literally designing the agents, the guardrails, and the governance that shape how insights reach and travel across the organization. Shipping fixes directly instead of queuing them. Shared context as the new deliverable. Context is getting co-built with product design engineering before the PRD exists so that every team builds from the same foundation of human truth. And finally, team engagement has risen as work moves upstream. We've heard a lot about, from the teams that we've heard on this webinar, that agentic workflows are freeing researchers for more strategic, creative, and frankly, more fun work. Hopefully, this is a sign that research is landing where it creates more and more value. And so taking these kind of takeaways into consideration, our discussion today will take you through 3 parts: aligning and encoding quality across AI systems, review framework and accountability at scale, and evaluation and governance in the agentic era, and what the future horizon might look like with these practices in mind. So to kick us off, I'm going to have Michael share a little bit of context of what is an eval model, what's the problem statement here, and why traditional research methods may not keep up with modern needs of enterprises today. So Michael?
Oh, Gordon, thank you for handing me that hot potato and trying to explain a fairly technical thing to, as a non-technical person, to a bunch of people. So if I get this wrong, please feel free to jump in the chat and add some detail. With all that said, I have been kind of at progressive stages of learning and really absorbing what evals are for quite some time, both as a student and as Dscout for our own internal systems, and more and more we're actually also doing this work with our customers. Okay, so when I first heard the term, I just heard, oh yeah, you evaluate the output of a system. Like, sure, yeah, that makes sense, right? And I just kind of thought that it was a word like any other time I've heard the word evaluate. What I've come to learn since then is that word stands for a fairly complex set of capabilities and techniques and tools that companies use. And at its most basic level, I just want to explain kind of what the essence of an eval is, or what it's trying to do. First, I think it's trying to answer, is this thing that we've created with an AI model, is it better than the last thing we made? And is it good enough to ship? Those are the questions you're trying to answer, okay? So why is that hard with AI or Gen AI? You've probably all heard the phrases non-deterministic systems, stochastic systems, right? What makes it hard is that our traditional ways that we would evaluate the quality of a thing, we could have a heuristic evaluation, we could have 10 people do a QA, do a usability test and get to a point of saturation. Well, those things don't work the same way anymore, right? Because the systems are non-deterministic. One person's experience can be different from the other. And so it's actually way harder to know if it's improved or not. How many times have you used an AI or two and you're like, is this output better than that one? Right? Well, I think we've probably all experienced that. That's the heart of what, when you're doing eval work and tooling and systems, that's really the heart of what you're trying to solve for. Is, does this meet fundamental requirements, and is it better than whatever else we've built or out there or competitors? So that is it in a nutshell. Gordon, do you want me to get into any more detail, or do you want to kind of move forward?
I think that's a good amount of, high level context. My understanding also was how much of this is actually how design organizations are scaling quality at scale, right? In ways that we are not hand-holding every single touch point.
Yeah, I think for teams in general, maybe that's in the team area. I do think this is a pretty incredible opportunity for user experience. And the last comment I'll make is because so much of the user experience now is what the model is saying or doing, or your prompting chains. So those just need to be designed and quality assessed like we would assess other traditional forms of UI. Right. But it's a different set of skill to appropriately design that conversation to create the right guardrails for it. Right. So that's kind of evals are very much the heart of how do you kind of keep the model aligned with the goals of your organization, their design goals, quality goals, etc.
And so I think on the next section here, we're going to hear from the panelists who are operating in enterprises of how they're actually approaching this in reality. And so the first question, as we look at aligning and encoding that quality so that it is scalable in AI systems, how are teams defining and aligning on what quality looks like? That good enough? And how are you encoding those principles to support activities before and after deployment? We heard from Donna Cho at Pinterest in one of the previous webinars. She said, the most impactful work our researchers do now get coded directly into the system, upstream as systems-ready principles, downstream as the eval frameworks that say whether an AI feature is good enough to ship. So to kick it off, Christina, I'd love to kind of call on you here on, what is this looking like over at Cigna Group and how you're thinking about it?
Yeah. Professionally, I think this is such an interesting question because of how the AI discourse is really shaping up in the general public and in the community at large. I don't have to tell you this, but the chatter, the talk, the anxiety is focused around the destructive things that AI can be responsible for. But the truth of the matter is that when we use it properly, AI can help us to have more of a watchful eye. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And to be quite to the point, if we're honest, we have somewhat of an inflated ego when it comes to being experts at things. And we oftentimes can't see past that point. We also carry in our biases, as we know. We make mistakes, we fail as humans. And the honest truth is that many organizations don't have a fully shared definition of what good looks like, particularly in a giant enterprise. We have opinions, we have tribal knowledge, we have egos. And we've always relied upon those systems to make our judgments. But AI can be seen as a forcing factor to do better as it relates to standards, particularly in the field of design. How many of you have had to convince teams of people to use your design system properly? How many arguments have you had with developers over the years about style? How many struggles have you seen related to voice and tone and to brand? The other side of AI is that when we implement it and construct it properly, it can provide that gatekeeping function that really helps us to get beyond the human opinion and debate. So if we set up our AI harness properly, and I just learned a new term, we're not calling it harness anymore. Michael, we're calling it factory.
Factories in the new harness. Like there's still harnesses are just fine, but you just got to, always new terms out there. I don't know. There's probably one beyond factory at this point. So
that was what I learned in the first 30 seconds of the conversation. Yeah. So if we set up our harness properly, if we have the right tools, we have the right architecture, we have the right connection points, the right agents, the right guardrails, we can catch the drift before it starts. And what we've been talking about is how to create design that's born right from the system and born accessible. And to me, this is one of the biggest struggles that we're facing right now as far as like generative output. So this is the point where AI stops becoming a wild card. It starts becoming that starter layer for standards and policy and governance. And that's the shift that I'd really underline for this room, that AI in the right environment and with the right construct can move us from systems of human ambiguity to governing at scale. So the discipline isn't how we trust AI to make good decisions. It's how we get precise enough about our standards that AI can provide a solid first pass, and then we can spend our human capacity on things that go deeper.
Well said.
Curious, on those precision points of sense, has your organization arrived at those precision and precise standards?
We're getting there. And it is a process, because everything's changing so fast and the advancements of all the systems and the harnesses and the methods are changing so quickly. I would say that we have a clear perspective on the framework, and we know what our anchors are systematically. And we're still figuring out the full method of implementation.
Yeah, I think the architecture, I would add, the architecture around these workflows, I think, is kind of ever changing. And, there are new ways emerging, different plugins and so forth. But the most important piece, which we were fortunate to have kind of at the ready, I think, is the articulation of the standards in such a way that they could become machine readable. So, the standards aren't in our heads. They're not, in this PowerPoint. They're not tribal knowledge. The standards are what the system is allowed to design. And so we've taken a lot of time to really identify what very specifically good looks like in certain contexts and these sort of prioritized use cases that we have of, what does a good email look like? What's an email that performs well? What are the attributes? How do you write a good call to action, in the case of content? And putting all of those pieces of context together, assembling those from different subject matter experts to something that is usable and scalable for more individuals and things that we can test over time and continue to improve.
And Shuman, what's it looking like over at Datadog of how you're approaching this?
I think I'm going to build off the point that Christina made, where AI is forcing organizations to answer the question that we have almost, in some ways, avoided. What does good actually mean? Historically, it has manifested in some abstract design principles, a catalog of design examples, or in best cases, like in the minds of our best people. And that barely worked when humans did all the work. And now with AI in the fold, it has become even more challenging because AI inherently doesn't have the intuition for the context you are building for. And it has to be taught that. So the whole exercise is about teaching AI about your context, about what good is in your world, in your company or your organization for your customers. So at Datadog, what we are doing right now is we are assembling the building blocks for that work, both on the design side, also on the research side. I would say the design side is like half a step ahead. It's a little more easier on design because we are moving from documenting in interfaces to documenting judgment. We can already see that happening in we have a skill marketplace within our design team. So it's starting to manifest in skills. Now, are those skills precise representation of what good is? Not yet. But for me, that's a building block that can be further refined. So skills are definitely one of them. The second thing that's happening on the research side is that we are again looking at the building blocks where any agentic research solution can be as good as the knowledge it's built on. Garbage in and garbage out. We were very excited about synth personas like 4 months back. And we realized, no, it's not the synth personas, it's the content that's feeding it, the synth personas. So we are now focusing on connecting different sources of customer insight, our own research repository to Zendesk customer tickets. And as we connect them, we hope to build a much more living understanding of what's going on with our customers. Over time, we want to kind of expand that by adding more signals from across the business. So zooming out, we are, you can say, at the foundation layer, where our goal is to bring all the disconnected pieces of information together, start to encode them in ways that AI and both humans can use downstream. I think Catherine said it very well. Like it's an exercise of turning tribal knowledge into institutional insights for both AI and humans downstream. So we are in that process right now.
I think that word tribal knowledge is so interesting, Christina, to even play on as like the state of how we've codified institutional knowledge that allows better collaboration between humans and, you know, the AI systems that we have here. Christian, curious to hear from you. You've been in research for a very long time. How is this changing how you think about quality, scaling rigor, all these kind of things that, you know, our panelists are sharing?
Well, I think before I dive into anything around quality, I find that it's important to first say, how are we defining experience? What are we talking about exactly? So what I have, even though we have a service design team and we focus on the bigger picture, I'm really going to zoom in on the digital user experience because that's what AI generally produces anyway, right? It's not doing service design for us yet. So how I've framed that in the past is I've said there's a simple model of user experience that has four major components, kind of in concentric circles. There's sort of how it looks, how it sounds, how it interacts, and then what it does to deliver value. And those four elements of the experience, you can separately examine the quality of them. Now, you have to look at how they interact, of course, and they certainly support each other. But in terms of how it looks, it's a simple way to look at the quality is whether how well the output complies with our design systems and visual design language standards. Are we actually using the design system? How it sounds, it's around utilizing and complying with our voice and tone and content guidelines. How it interacts is often really, at minimum, it's around, is it simple enough for the target audience to actually use in order to unlock the value? And then does it actually deliver value to the customer? It comes down to, does it really pass the muster in terms of doing, hitting a certain bar in terms of desirability or, concept testing? So what we do with that, once we've defined the overall elements of user experience, we can say, okay, how do we get an AI system to support us in ensuring that we've hit the minimum level of quality for each of those pieces? And we do that by starting to express what those mean in either markdown files that are machine readable or converting, creating prompt libraries or rules for the AI agents to read and consume so that we don't have every, designer having to write it out from scratch. Or just making sure that the design and content guidelines are available to agents to ensure that they reference it.
Michael, I'm curious to hear if you have any examples working with, the Dscout customer base on how this is actually playing out in practice.
Yeah, I can maybe give like a very specific example. I think everyone's made some great points. On Shaman's comment, I'll kind of illustrate this is like, I think smart around this idea of machine teaching. That's what training ultimately is. So kind of think about like when people talk about training a model in the early days of model training, think of it like a lecture or all the readings the model has to do. Evals are kind of like the testing. Even the terms from evals are rubrics, right? So I think about teaching and how you would evaluate whether someone would pass the test or not, right? And so so I'll give like a very literal example of some ways that this is done. So one of the ways you would do that is you create fairly complex what are called rubrics. So at Dscout, we recently launched an AI moderation tool, right? So it's a tool that helps do kind of more dynamic follow-ups, typically almost as a replacement for, well, it's called AI moderator. It's really a replacement for kind of more unmoderated techniques. So you have to build a set of rubrics around, well, what should this, when this moderator is performing well, what is it doing? And you have to get very precise about like, it shouldn't interrupt, right? But at the same time, you probably don't want it to wait forever to respond to people, right? So you have all of these different rules about what's acceptable that you have to specify in great detail, right? You can imagine these rubrics, there's different rubrics, they get pretty long, right? And then when you kind of and depending on whether you're a model maker or a prompt tuner, there's a lot more complexity in terms of what you're doing. Typically, if you're a model maker, you might take those evals, tweak your model weights, and then you're probably building something called a reward model from those evaluations to basically test successive waves of the model to see if it's improving. You're kind of tuning the model to respond to different rewards or what's called RL, reinforcement learning signal, to kind of get a better model. For many of us who are more prompt tuning, like you're not like taking the model from the ground, what you're kind of doing is you're refining your prompting strategies to say like, and your evals to say move from, hey, we did 100 people and we got a 20% pass rate. We made some changes. We're going to do it again. We're going to get to a 25% pass rate, a 50% pass rate as they keep tweaking prompts and picking different models. That technique is referred to as hill climbing in the industry. So it's kind of taking it from a baseline and moving that baseline up to a point where you're like, okay, we're at a point where we can release this. Now, of course, the art of how do you create a good rubric? Who should create the rubric? Where does the rubric come from? Right? That's actually huge. It's a massive opportunity for UX teams. Often that's come from engineering teams. They've been very technical rubrics. They might define like what is technically a good video, but that might not be at all what a user thinks a good video is. Okay. So that's kind of like one of the major distinctions. And so often teams at different points need signal from different types of users or audiences to really refine what's in that rubric and then what does good look like against it.
Michael, I imagine so much of the work research teams have to inject is like, making sure that that customer view is present in these systems, but also the day-to-day activities that they do know. So much is that deepening specificity of what, the tribal knowledge that sits in our heads, right? So how do you actually codify that at scale? It seems like a big challenge for any team today.
Yeah, I think this is a very shared responsibility again across many people in product orgs, depending on the size of your org, right? You're gonna also have dedicated teams who specialize in post-training and eval. I mean, this is a massive industry. It's a huge part of shaping how AI gets created. But certainly, I think researchers and designers and product managers have very large roles to play in creating precise definitions of not only what's good. And the crazy thing is just like you climb one hill and then you redefine it again because you might your goals might move, right? There's building a good interviewer, then there's building a world-class interviewer, right? Like think about you're just constantly adjusting where the end might be. But I would say, yeah, I think it's this set of skills of learning how to create the right rubric, what the right inputs are, how to be precise, how to measure, is it actually delivering on the rubric that we created, to me looks a lot like UX skills, just
Yep.
manifested in a slightly different form.
Yeah. Quick note, Catherine, before we move to the next question, you're a content designer. Of all people, words is your magic. How are you kind of operating in this climate to guide other people with that content magic? Like, where does that sort of feel like today for you?
Yeah, it's so interesting because what goes into great content design isn't just, good voice voice and tone. It's actually a big balancing act of what are the constraints? What's the business context? How does this work on the back end? What's the customer expectation, and kind of aligning all of those things. There's so much that happens, in our heads. I'm sure everyone feels that way who does design work. So what our automation work is forcing us to do is actually consider, like, what are all those inputs? We're training the machine to know all the things that we know. And so we're really expanding the consideration set of context here from, what are our policies? What are our existing customer journeys? Of course, what are our systems and sources? What's our data that we might be able to leverage? What's our semantic layer that will help us make connections between disparate pieces of content? So it's actually a really thrilling time to be able to expose what has traditionally been a very insular kind of experience, things that are, you need certain people to work on certain areas because of that institutional knowledge. And so kind of exposing all of that has been really exciting. And I think it's been really rewarding for my team to participate in that as well, because it is highlighting so much of what is often hidden.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that. On the next section, this is going to go deeper into, the fact that there are components of the workflow that the AI eval models can cover, but what happens when things don't go right? What does accountability look like as AI takes more of that work? And also, what are the frameworks to define when is human intervention necessary in those last mile, cases? So we have two quotes here. One from Richard Dalton. He said that AI can very much be the R in the RACI model doing the work, but I don't think AI could ever be the A right now. The accountable party for the work still has to be human. We also heard from Brian from Nationwide. We frame it as human AI teaming rather than human in the loop. That means making sure that the AI agent is aligned with the human's goals and that the AI itself is understandable, controllable, and ultimately resilient. So we'd love to kind of jump into, any panelist that has a strong point of view on, like, what is sort of the problems emerging as we begin to automate more and more of our work. What's the sort of boundaries between AI and the humans in the system right now? And Shuman, I see you smiling.
The accountability part, I just feel it might vary by industries. So I'm assuming maybe for, say, banking or a legal AI agent, the accountability might be too high, but maybe more SaaS products, the accountability is still being figured out. There's a lot more give and forgiveness in the system right now for us to try and use things. So I've heard things like maybe someone from the last panel said human in the loop is shifting to human on the hook. That is a possibility. But even if the human is on the hook, I don't think, at least in my context, they are not yet held accountable for it. It is seen as a learning experience. Okay, what went wrong? How can we avoid it the next time? So accountability is more seen as a learning moment at this point of time. But eventually, there is a human involved right now. Nothing that we ship out is like completely just blindly shipped by an agent yet. So there is some level of accountability, but I would say it's a much more deeper topic. I think we'll, as an industry, will need more time to like really figure out where does the true accountability lie. To your second point, when should human be in the loop? I think I have a different frame to it. The question is more around which decisions deserve human judgment. And I think if you frame that prompt from that perspective, then it becomes easier to answer that question. So, for example, at least in our case, when we are right now designing and shipping things, we have human in the loop throughout the chain. For internal prototypes that we build, we are trying to use agents now to just build prototypes. And what we are realizing is that humans are required when either agents get stuck and they let you know that we are stuck on a decision, or they are involved when we are not getting the right output. from the agent as we were expecting. And maybe that's where eval eventually helps us to kind of unblock that. So I'll say the first question around around accountability is, for us, it's a learning moment. For when what deserves human judgment. Right now, I think it's every touch point that we have. I feel we are heading to a future where human vigilance will no longer be a strategy. But I feel still there is some time for us to land in that state.
I'd love to jump in here following your comments. Anshuman, I totally agree. I think it's industry specific, or the industry can influence the perspective. And I have a personal and professional opinion that human in the loop is a concept that really needs correction. I know that you referenced the idea of a change in term, and I'd like to offer one as well. I think the very idea of a human just being in the loop with AI assumes that the human is actually a bystander and not an owner. And I really want to change the vocabulary there. The term that we've been using internally is human at the helm. I think a human at the helm is the creator. They're the crafter. They're the commander of AI, not a bystander. I think that this term, human at the helm, sets the tone for us to really assume the control that we need to, and articulates the right level of responsibility. Yes, I am influenced by my industry, but I think in general, that's sort of my personal philosophy. And then I'd love to just share a little bit of our framework. It sounds like we have similarities, Anshuman. Our framework is founded on the articulation of an ethical model, and we're working with defined tiers of involvement. In health, the human is never out of the loop, but we can use AI to deliver faster with greater personalization. And so there are 3 tiers that we've really tried to define: human-defined governance, which we touched on a little bit in the first topic, human judgment, and human authority. So I can unpack those. That human-defined governance is where the human at the helm does the most consequential work by actually setting up the exact orders and the guardrails and the standards for the agents. And Catherine touched on this a little bit. Humans define what good looks like. We encode the standards, we set those guardrails, we shape the ethical frame, and then AI is allowed essentially to operate inside of that. That includes our design system, our accessibility standards, our safety rules, our models. AI doesn't decide anything. The human authors it, and because it's encoded, it's enforceable. The next tier is the human judgment tier, and this is where AI may do a first pass or pattern matching, but the human makes the call and the human owns the outcome. So again, at the helm. And AI helps us get to a starting place, but it doesn't make judgments. And then the third tier is just that human authority. And this is a tier where AI has no place at all. The authority is with the human at the helm, not just steering, they're answering for and responsible for the outcome entirely. When you put those 3 together, you've got a framework that defines how, when, where, and who we can get a defensible articulation of where the human is, why they're there, what they own. And then governance is where we set the standard. So we apply judgment where we apply it, authority is where we stand behind it. And then our accountability stays essentially with the human, and roles don't transfer to systems. They evolve for humans who use them.
Bravo, Christina. That is such a beautiful articulation with such depth that you've reached. And Christian, I'm curious to hear, what sort of stage of definition are you at on this framework?
Yeah, the ability to utilize AI to produce more and more experiences has really coincided with the desire to really express and codify our standards for experience. And by that's a really good, maybe not just a coincidence, but it's a really good coincidence in that by being able to define and measure what we mean by quality and what the experience should reach, not just for ourselves, but for AI, it allows us to then hold the AI accountable to delivering a certain level of quality, but also, to ensure that we're responsible for hitting a certain mark. We, as in I love the point around being at the helm. We're using these tools to produce experiences that need to meet a certain level of quality. A recent example that happened with us was we had a chatbot that was produced by the TD Insurance team that was kind of built really outside of the design process and was ready to go to market. And so we said, hey, we have experience, especially AI experience guidelines and a scorecard, that includes a rubric for how you get a certain score that we'd like to apply to this particular this experience. We applied it, and the score was so bad that they decided not to actually generally release it, to keep it very limited, even though it was, it's out there. It's not like promoted or put out there, and it forces that conversation around what it's not enough just to produce something, but it has to hit a certain level of quality. And we essentially did that by taking some of those previously mentioned elements of the experience and ways of judging that and turning it into a quantitative score, using, as Michael referred to, like using rubrics for what gets a certain score, similar to what you do in the pure method, something that I've worked on in the past. But to be able to express like how good it is in terms of simplicity, how good it is in terms of content quality. Now, right now, we're doing that all with humans, where we're not at a point where AI does the actual judgment of the quality, but we're looking at a future where we can get explicit enough and clear enough about what we want our experiences to look like, and what kind of scores they need to reach, and how you get a score like that I believe we can get an AI to assist, or maybe even take over some of the scoring as well.
Yeah, I would just say it's very common in most online AI systems you're interacting with, or most AI systems you're interacting with. There's two types of evaluations. There's online evaluations, which are called LLM as a judge evaluations. So you're using the LLM to basically do real-time assessments of its performance around these structured things. So think about, like you're saying to the LLM, let's take a simple one. Let's grade a survey question. Not that simple. Survey questions are hard to write, but you might want one evaluation. Like, we don't want a double-barreled question. So you literally create a evaluator that's going to measure every question that goes through, and did it add multiple questions to a single question, right? So there's going to be a score generated, and you're going to basically be able to use that sometimes to create corrective action in the system, but sometimes just to store your scores. So I just want to define, totally agree with many of the comments made, but where human in the loop specifically will show up is sometimes you might create an evaluation where it might be an online evaluation, like the system making a judgment. Let's say the judgment was, I'll stay in our context, this participant didn't do such a good job according to the system. Okay? Well, in that case, we want to flag the human in the loop. Does that make sense? We want to say, hey, we've got a thing you should take a look at. That's a more complicated judgment call than our system should make. And so often these combinations of technically, the whole system, I totally believe, is the accountability of our teams. Like, we're accountable for the experiences we put into the world, human, AI, or not. But I would say that the technical notion of human in the loop is kind of making these decisions of when you need to call a human in and when you don't, and kind of, to a degree, all of these systems face these questions. If you talk about what is agentic, we could have like a whole debate around that. But these questions around, like, when is the system performing semi-autonomously? When is the system not performing semi-autonomously, right? That's kind of what you're trying to fine grain in some of these decisions about when you pull a human in or not, in my mind.
It feels like, as we talk about this, it feels like, Christina, you've hit on something, which is, what worldview are we looking at this definition process? That I think you've really acutely paid attention to the positioning of the human amongst the system. So I think that's something just really worthy to go deeper on, I think, in this next section, because this is calling on how we're shaping the horizon of how organizations think, act, evaluate. What does this unlock for them? And I think there's an N number of techniques that we can do to achieve some of these things. But I think there's something really important about what does it mean to actually have the human at the helm, or a human-defined framework. So I would love to, kind of kick you off here, because I think something Mary said at Cisco She says, agents pile on one another. We're going to have to be delivering experiences that no one explicitly designed. Something interesting there. And researchers can help understand what that means and how this needs to evolve. But I think what you've added is a worldview perspective on how this might, be approached. So I'd love to kind of kick it off with you here, as it seems like the audience is also resonating really hard on this one.
Yeah, that's I definitely think it's a worldview thing. And I think that, this has been such an interesting and unique journey as a professional, because this is the first time in my professional career, and it's too long and I won't go into the details there, but the first time that we've really felt the floor underneath us just completely shift. And I feel that our approach initially was so reticent because we were self-conscious about the technology and what we did or didn't understand. And now we've evolved and we understand it, and we're comfortable with it, and we can take more of that power back, right? Like, I feel like the whole idea of human in the loop came about because we weren't sure where we belonged. And now we have to articulate that. So I do think it's a worldview thing, and I think it's philosophical. I also think it's so interesting that so many of the concepts that we're working with AI in general and intelligence at large are philosophical and based in the idea of philosophy and like what our place is in evolving and in thinking. So I'm 100% think it's a worldview perspective. As far as the question at hand and the idea of agentic research and governance, I have this vision that AI applied in the right way to a research practice that is intimately tied to accessibility and ethics will get us to an understanding of what is deeply human in our work. And I feel that that is a little bit of a touchy subject. And again, I do think it's wrapped up in the idea of worldview and stance and place. But the horizon that we're building toward is research that can tell us what people mean and what brings them meaning, what respects their agency, what actually serves them in the moment they're being served. So I feel like the role of AI here is to help us understand what I would call, this sounds fancy, forgive me, but the permutations of variability. Human variability is enormous, and traditional research has always tried to compress it. And that was because of necessity, right? We had to compress into segments, into personas, into averages, and we called that the user, but that's the group, not the individual. The compression is where true personal empathy gets lost, and where accessibility gaps and equity gaps have historically opened up. So I feel agentic research can help us go in a different way. It can help us explore variability at a scale and depth that human-only research simply cannot. So it's every accessibility profile, every context, every moment, every combination of need, of preference, of constraint. And to me, that's the deeper unlock. I think as designers, we can use AI to understand what makes something personalizable, what brings meaning. And that's on a far deeper level than demographics or persona. It is unique. It is singular. The idea of persona was a leap forward from segmentation, but that's still compression. So I think the horizon in post-persona research is where agents help us to map the topology of human need, and where the experiences that we build can respond to a person as they are in the moment they're in, rather than a proxy for a category they were assigned to. And none of that is possible without governance. We have to really understand and unpack it and go back to the worldview and figure out what are the constructs that actually make up these mental models in a very unique and specific way. So we have to sort of undermine everything that we have built as a foundation and rebuild it with a new method. And I think you're seeing a lot of the practices do that. So I guess I'll conclude by saying that I think agentic research at this depth that I'm talking about, it generates enormous power, and that power without governance is not innovation, it's exposure. So what we're trying to build towards is research that's fused with accessibility, that's more deeply human, that's guided by ethics, and that is going to be made possible by AI and seeing that variability before we get to a state of compression.
It's almost, what I'm hearing is being able to see individuals as they are rather than these group buckets. So I think there's a framing here around post-persona research. Christian and Schumann, anything you guys want to jump in here?
Well, I feel like the agentic research has a massive potential. There's no question about it. Like the ability to go off and be able to come back with really powerful insights in an unguided way. There's no question how powerful it is. But there's some inherent limitations to that to allowing that to happen that have to be acknowledged. And that is that if we look at the corpus of data that's out there, there's a lot of it, a lot of quantitative behavioral data from our analytics teams. There's a ton of survey results sitting somewhere. There's lots of video of qualitative research or even audio and transcripts and so on. But what an agent lacks is a lived experience and the inherent ability to apply empathy and theory of mind to a kind of data set that would allow it to fully grasp an insight and know that it has more generalizable power. And I kind of call that ability, that human ability to sort of see something especially in qualitative research, when you see something occur and you're able to determine that like that issue is not sitting in isolation, but it's something that it's reflecting a larger principle and it's likely to be generalizable. I call that qualitative validity. That it's a very difficult concept to explain, but it's essentially like researchers are good at helping others who are observing or seeing data like understand, is this something I can actually bank on and maybe redesign based on or conclude from, or do I need to see larger numbers? Is it something that just inherently requires a quantitative data set for? And I feel like research agents going off on their own, I don't think they're at a point where they have this judgment, this qualitative validity judgment, because I don't think they quite have empathy and theory of mind fully embedded in them yet. So I'm not saying it'll never happen, but like that, there still needs to be some level of skill and craft from the research side to truly be able to do that and to guide decisions and insights around that kind of data.
And Schumann?
I agree with what Christian is saying, and that has kind of shaped my own strategy at Datadog on where to start, which is starting with connecting all the data sources. But I want to kind of zoom out a bit. I remember when I started my career as a designer, small things like we used to do a lot of paper prototyping. It doesn't happen often. And that I kind of thought of this a few months back and I started to think why. And I came to a realization that a lot of practices within research and design were shaped by the limitations of the engineering capabilities. So early 2000s, if I have to test something with a customer, building a prototype was very costly. I used to design in Photoshop. There was no easy way to kind of build a prototype outside Balsamiq. And so the easiest way as a method, as a practice, was to like, can we just paper sketch this and get feedback from people? That's the easiest and cheapest way to get signals from customers and users. Over time, as the dev process has accelerated, we have gradually seen our practices both on research and design shift. And now we are at a place where the dev process is going through an exponential jump in terms of acceleration and speed. So we are at a moment where we have to kind of really relook at the practices that we have. And as we look in the future, now that we can build faster, I don't need to start with a paper prototype. I can give a thoughtful prompt to get a solution that I can test with users. The latest I heard was I heard about teams who are using OpenClaw. So as they are running user testing or like testing with their users and they're getting feedback, OpenClaw is running on the side, iterating their designs on the fly so that by the end of this conversation, you can actually show that, hey, is this what you meant when you said this? So I think we are just kind of some of the most tactical ways of how things have happened are changing. And as those tactical ways change, it is going to have more upstream impact on what research does. So today, when I look at my team, research mostly operates episodically. We run studies, gather a lot of insights, share with the team, and then move on to the next research. And I think with what I am sensing and seeing, AI is giving us the opportunity to make learning continuous instead of event-driven, learning more proactive than reactive. So I feel the ripple effects of what coding agents have done is already impacting research as a practice and design as a practice. And then there is the acceleration and the role expansion that these AI is doing for these practices directly.
Michael, any final thoughts here before we shift to the last question? I realized 5 minutes left.
I'll just be brief. I mean, I love Christina's provocation, and I think I do see a world where by us being able to go much wider and deeper with people, I think we can really bring the power of, I think we can really strengthen the power of what research can do for organizations. So I'm very excited about bringing that into reality. And I also think what you're kind of seeing, and I think one of your quotes mentioned that, is when teams really embrace this whole evaluation mindset versus just agentic systems and tooling, when you kind of embrace evaluations, what I've seen is like a tremendous, like the UX teams that are really involved in eval, they're getting the things that this field always talks about: the seat at the table, executive interest and buy-in. Like, people are passionate about understanding how these systems and tools are working for real people. So I would just really encourage people that there's a tremendous opportunity in developing more curiosity about this. Anyone wants to reach out to me to talk more about it, I think this is just a very exciting area for our field.
All right. On the last question, to kind of wrap this up, open Q&A. Do we have time for open Q&A, Colleen? I don't think so, right?
No, I think you want to just maybe one question and then shift to the closing.
Yeah, I think if anything, just looking through all the comments, I think, there's just a tremendous amount of interest around human at the helm, ethics, and also, Michael, Kranthal, you called out something really interesting, which is it's less about agentic research per se, but the ability of AI to personalize the experience in real time to accommodate, the view of the user at a level not possible before. So I think that in itself is a worthy expansion that we definitely should go deeper on, because I think all of it is actually allowing us to see humans as they are rather than these broad generalizations that we've assumed for quite some time. Just on this last question, if we flip to the next slide, this was sort of the finale of our 4-part webinar series, and we've heard a ton about researchers having to kind of behave like water, being able to mold across spaces and places and really be malleable to those needs. But I think something really important in this conversation, really heightening agency. And so I certainly see water as a flexible material, but I also see when water can also maybe crystallize into some format like ice that actually has strength in what it is. So I'm curious to hear just from this panelist group, is there any material thing that has changed in your mind since we've embarked on this webinar series, and what you would kind of describe this next shift as? And we have 1 minute, so let's go quick.
I'll jump in, Gordon. Yeah. So when I think about my team, the thing that kind of came to mind, which they may not be thrilled to hear, is mycelium. So that kind of fungal network that is in the earth that connects through distributed intelligence and communication. And I think AI is transforming my team from a collection of individual contributors to more like a mycelial network where knowledge spreads very quickly and expertise is sort of collective, and it actually is elevating the work of everybody, producing better quality because of the new tools that we have to share all of this intelligence.
I love that one. Michael?
Oh, that was a good one. Catherine was prepared. So
You can
no
take
fair.
hers.
And she's a writer. I mean, she's got a lot of advantages here. So fancy words and all. I'm going to cop out and say I do think a biological material is a really interesting one to bring forward because I think there are properties of what we're creating here. Sometimes I feel like old software we were building with Legos, you know, and this feels not like it feels more like we're trying to use organic matter to create something now, something that has a little bit more flexibility and movement to it, right? And so some of our old Lego methods don't work quite as well. Okay, so I said what it's not. That's a total cop out. Christian, what do you got? Go
I
for
just
it.
love the idea of an interconnected network
Yeah.
of neurons and knowledge and information. Working in silos as my team often has with different businesses. This is forcing us to change and really align on what we all believe in and what we all set as standards, and AI supports that. It's been a really good side benefit.
Awesome. And Shuman?
We are going through this phase of metamorphosis. I'm going to stick to what I said last time. I feel like when we are like wet clay or clay that you are working with to make it malleable and do a new shape.
Awesome. Christina, ending us here.
I feel like we have to be like organza in the wind, and I'm admittedly influenced by my feed. There's a recurring fine art artist, his Thomas Jackson Fine Art. He does wind sculptures with fabric, and I think that is such an appropriate metaphor for now because it's responsive but receptively fluid. And I feel like we have to be able to hold our shape but float on air right now and inherit the shape of the wind. So that's what I'll go with. But I have to say, I also agree with Catherine won this round.
Mycelium
Like
networks.
my network is it.
I love that. They all speak to one another. Just to wrap it up here on the final slide, all of our perspectives in the 4-part webinars will be bundled into an upcoming micro paper that we're going to be launching later this fall. It will take all of the greatness that we've heard to provide audiences, on the insights. So scan the QR code if you want to get updates when this paper does come live. It'll be a great resource for you guys to guide your team. So looking forward to that conversation. And panelists, thank you for joining us today. This was such a thought-provoking thing that I have so much to think about. So just wanted to acknowledge all of you, and to Dscout for hosting this conversation with us. It's been a fantastic summer together.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.